Yeah, no, there's a tremendous amount of money that the state is kicking in there as well. There's, I think, about $300 million in transportation funds that will be used in that corridor there from the Delta Center East. And then I think there's an additional $300 million as well that will go to different parts of the project. So the state is certainly doing their part, and then again the people that will benefit the most from it though are the city and county, and so it makes sense that they would share a bigger burden than people who live in Sanpete County or San Juan County.
You were the first to visit Canada this year in terms of U.S. governors, and you said at the end of your trade mission that you plan to send letters to fellow governors encouraging them to make similar trade missions to Canada. Have you already sent these letters, and have you heard back from governors about your trip?
Yeah, we haven't sent the letter yet. It's being prepared right now. We're working on it, but that letter will probably go out next week sometime, and I anticipate that it will be very well received. I have been speaking with governors about potential trade missions, not all of them to Canada, but to other places as well, and it's very encouraging. I think most governors will do trade missions this year to different parts of the world. I think we'll definitely see more going to Canada, and I'll continue to encourage them. It's an easier one, even if it's not part of your kind of trade mission strategy. Getting to Canada is so close and so easy that I anticipate that we'll see more going there.
Governor, the explosion at Northrop Grumman yesterday leaves a lot of answers, leaves a lot of questions. What was in the building? Were there any emissions that were harmful that were released? Is there an environmental impact? Have you been given any of those answers?
So I don't have all of the answers yet, but what I have been told is that there is no danger to the public, and so our public safety team is continuing to work with them to understand what was the cause, why did it happen, and how to prevent that from happening in the future.
Are you satisfied with the transparency?
So far, yes, and we'll see if we have any other questions once the investigation is completed.
Governor Cox, speaking about immigration, what is your stance on Washington County's agreement with ICE to address illegal immigration, and do you think that other law enforcement agencies here in your state should do the same?
Well, yeah. So we've been working very closely with ICE from the beginning of the administration. We've had almost daily contact with ICE, and that's true of many of our counties as well. And so I think whether those agreements are formal or informal, there's certainly collaboration happening there, and I think that will continue.
Other question about immigration, your stance on the recent revocation of nearly 50 international students' visas across Utah.
Yeah, so that's one we've asked the administration for more information. We've asked them to give us a little bit of a heads up when these things are happening. We'd like to understand better what the criteria are for those changes. Certainly, we know that there were some that had criminal backgrounds that we were not aware of, that the universities were not aware of. Others, that does not appear to be the case, and so we would very much like to figure that out. I know that last year on a couple occasions, President Trump on podcasts and other forums talked about how important it is to attract the most talented and brightest from other countries to our country, and we know how important those visas are and how important immigrants are to building our economy, and we're very fortunate to have the greatest system of higher education in the world. It's been it really has been the star of education, and we're a place where the best and brightest have always wanted to come, and so it's important that we vet those who come, that we make sure we understand their backgrounds, that they don't pose any threats, that they're supportive of our country and the work that's being done here. And then it's important that we get them and we keep them, and so that is an area for sure where we're having ongoing dialogue. We want to make sure that some of these very, very bright students that are here, as long as they're here, they don't pose any threat or have any criminal background. We want to continue to attract those types of students.
And has the administration responded to you?
Not yet. We've reached out to them. We know there was a statement. I think the Department of Homeland Security did refer us to a statement that came out, a policy last week that said that they would consider anti-Semitic activity on social media, but we don't know if that was the case with those who have received those notices.
Governor,
right now.
today is the Great Utah Shakeout.
Yeah, I know. In fact, I think we were supposed to be shaking like 8 minutes ago.
Probably, but I wanted to ask you, there has been budget requests for early alert warning systems. The Seismic Safety Commission by the state was disbanded in 2024. A bill this year to create another safety commission never made it through the legislative session. Do you feel like the state is doing enough to actually be prepared when you see budget requests not funded and commissions disbanded?
Yeah. So look, there's always work that needs to be done on the funding side. We understand that. The commission's work, we have experts that are doing this work all over the state. Utah State University has several experts that are working on this. The University of Utah as well. We are getting the information that we need from the experts to do the work. We have several projects going on across the state, and specifically with infrastructure across the state. So dam safety, water pipelines. There's work being done there. We have been able to get some funding for those projects over the last couple of years. We've been able to notify and map the buildings across the Wasatch Front that don't have the right foundations and the right building materials that could pose a real threat, including the governor's mansion. When that happens, somebody else will be governor. So we know how dangerous those buildings are, and we'll continue to work for it. This is something that's going to take decades to do, and I do feel like we're moving in the right direction, but certainly some urgency is helpful.
On that same note, winter is coming to a close, which means runoff season is upon us. How are you feeling about that? Any emergency declarations and defunding? Are we going to need a sandbag? What have you been prepped on that?
Yeah, Sage, thank you. We feel really good about where we are. If you followed the water year closely, again, along the Wasatch Front, the Great Salt Lake Basin, we were above average, a little bit above average, so pretty normal year for most of the state. And because we've had a couple warm-ups now over the weeks where we've gotten up into the 70s and even up into the 80s a couple times, and then it's cooled off today. It's cool again. We're getting some snow, which is much needed and great. That warming and cooling trend and what the long range forecast is, we do not anticipate having any big runoff. There may be some localized issues, as there always are, but we don't anticipate any issues there. However, I will say it wasn't a great year for all of the state, and southern Utah, especially southwestern Utah, was well below average, and they are seeing some elevated drought conditions there. I would say yes, there is a very real possibility. In fact, we're working on it right now of an emergency declaration for a couple counties, maybe more than a few counties in the southwest corner of our state that will be experiencing drought, which will hurt our agriculture business in those areas and some others. So we'll be working with local officials and emergency officials on that.
The COVID laws tripped up plans for a drought declaration. Are you looking to address that, considering that you're limited to every 30 days, and a drought certainly doesn't last 30 days?
Yeah. So again, I want to be clear about what that does and doesn't do. It doesn't limit a drought declaration. I can make a declaration at any time. It just to continue the declaration, the legislature just needs an opportunity to weigh in. We could have done that earlier. It doesn't really impact anything, but because the legislature isn't coming together in April, we didn't want to have them come back just for this. So with a May session coming up, that gives us an opportunity to work closely with them to issue a drought declaration.
It is of a veto override session.
That's a great question. You would have to ask somebody in the legislature, which I know you have, Lindsay. And we feel very good about the vetoes. I think if you read the veto letters, they were thoughtful, well-intentioned. I will tell you, I had several legislators on a couple of those vetoes who actually voted for the bills, who came back to me and said, "Hey, after reading your letter, I agree with you. That makes sense to me." And so I think it's fairly unlikely we'll have a veto override, but that it wouldn't surprise me if they did.
Are you in any discussions to potentially stave off a veto in any way, potentially bringing something back in a special session instead of having them?
No,
override?
are going to have a special session. We had talked about some things. I signed a couple things that that we had agreement on to come back in a special session, and I'm always open to looking if we need to add something else there, then we possibly could. And so those conversations are ongoing, but there's no negotiation to prevent a veto override session in exchange for something in a special session. But it is possible that you could see something in a special session from the veto where they've agreed to fix something that we didn't like about a bill, and they just don't want to wait a year to do that.
You have expressed some frustrations about the flag bill and certain things that were included or maybe could have been negotiated. Are you talking to them about fixing that bill?
So we haven't had any discussion about that bill coming back, Ben. Yeah.
On Tuesday, Trump asked whether Harvard should lose its tax-exempt status and be taxed as a political entity because of political and ideological views. Are you worried how, breaking this norm could be used against conservative or religious organizations under future administrations?
Yeah, so heaven knows I have lots of disagreements with Harvard and the way that that they've operated. I think those have come to light over the past couple years. There's been some real upheaval there, and I had a chance to go to school there. Decided not to and went somewhere else. But there are lots of great things that happen at Harvard and great things. Some of the brightest thinkers in our country today and here in the state of Utah come out of Harvard, and it's a very important institution. So I think it's one we should care about. One of the things I like to do in my job, and I encourage everyone to try a thought experiment, and that is to just ask yourself how you would react if the other side did the thing that your team is doing now. And I think it's a good check on us at all times. And I am worried about the destruction of norms that happened. I worried about it during the Biden administration. It's a good example of that are the pardons that Biden issued to kind of family and friends. Something that we warned about, that breaking that norm is a bad idea, and doubling down on those things. There's no end to your team did it, so we're going to do it even more. It's just a terrible way to run a country. This is one where, despite my significant disagreements with Harvard, I would be very wary. And by the way, Harvard has tons of money. Maybe it does make sense that universities with those types of endowments should pay some taxes, right? We can have that discussion, and I think it's a worthy discussion. Lots of discussions about these big endowments, and are they doing what they were intended to do, and should there be public funding or public subsidies for that type of thing? I'm absolutely open to that conversation. But when we do it for ideological purposes, I try to imagine what happens if my team loses another election. I suspect that sometime in the future we might lose an election. It seems like that's what happens. It could be in 28. And what that means then for, imagine a world where a Gavin Newsom gets elected president and decides that he wants to go after conservative causes, right? That he thinks religion should not be exempt. And then we have institutions in our state like Brigham Young University or a church that is headquartered here who is now facing the very real possibility of that type of backlash. Or imagine going after Second Amendment groups who believe in gun safety and taking away their tax exempt status. It worries me. It scares me, and I think we should tread very carefully.
The Trump administration is ignoring court orders to return inmates in that El Salvadorian prison. This seems to fit into what you're saying about breaking down norms, but do you have thoughts about whether is this a constitutional crisis or the potential for a constitutional crisis?
Well, look, we've certainly had constitutional struggles before between the courts and executives. I think if you go back to FDR, Woodrow Wilson, similar, that breaking down of norms that happens. This is an interesting one where you have a Supreme Court order, a 9-0 order, And so there's the problem with this is there's just no nuance in the discussions. It's like either you hate the Constitution or you want terrorists living in America. It seems like those are the two choices. And I think there's another choice out there, and that is that you follow the court order. That this person was here, the one that I think you're referring to, the Garcia case, that person was here illegally and probably isn't a great person, probably should be deported. And so I think you can do those things. I think you can bring him back, go through the process, and then have him deported. And that's probably the way it should work. It really does matter that we hold to these constitutional norms, but pushing the boundaries of those norms is the prerogative and was intended. Like that's okay. The founders saw these types of things happening, knew that they would happen. It's not the worst thing to challenge those norms, see where the lines are, and then work within those lines. So, but I think we can do both of those things. People talk about, well, why would an illegal alien have the same constitutional rights as an American citizen? And they don't. They just don't. But due process, there are different levels to due process, and I think that 9-0 court order I don't know that it was surprising to anybody, at least with a legal background, because that's how you determine if someone is a U.S. citizen or not, and that really matters. It's not. You don't have that type of constitutional protection to protect someone who's here illegally. You have that type of protection to protect those of us who are here legally, and so I don't think it's the end of the administration's goals to fix what was so broken during the last administration. I think we can do both of those things.
Back to Northrop Grumman for a minute. What is the state's role in the investigation as you understand it?
We communicate regularly.
Okay. Would you also speak to the importance of, with the federal government, is that what you're referring to with the company or the feds when you say communicate regularly?
With the company.
With the company,
Yeah.
Okay. What is the importance of Northrop Grumman's footprint in Utah?
Oh, yeah, it's hugely important. It's one of the largest employers in northern Utah. The work they're doing is some of the most critical work in our nation right now. This is a great example of how Utah's economy is thriving and the relationship, the private-public relationship. The state was very wise in taking some land outside of the Hill Air Force Base and then setting that land aside for businesses that would do work in the defense industry, and we're really a model to the rest of the nation. So it's incredible that we're able to get those thousands and thousands of jobs, and again, one of the most important defense contracts in the country right now.
Governor, going back to water really quick and the drought conditions in southern Utah that you talked about, are you worried about the impacts to Lake Powell or concerned about other kind of recreational areas in the area? Yeah,
we're looking at those numbers. Always worried about Lake Powell. I mean, we've been worried about the Colorado and Lake Powell for years. The good news is that Lake Powell, that water going into Powell does not come from the southwest side of the state. So that's more kind of the Colorado area and north, including northern Utah, northeastern Utah, and Flaming Gorge and that area. So the water is a little bit better. The water content in the mountains is a little bit better there. The other good news is that all of our reservoirs were above average coming into this year. So even a below average year isn't going to cause that much damage to the recreational side of things. But it is something we're always monitoring, that we're careful about. I would also just note, I've noted before, that Washington County in particular has done more when it comes to water conservation than any county in the state over the past couple of years. They've gotten really serious about it after we talked about it for years and pleaded and asked, and they've taken that on in big ways. So they're better prepared to have a rough year like the one that they're facing right now.
On the issue of the Colorado River, have you been updated on the status of negotiations, and what are you being told?
Yeah, so we get updates monthly on the status from our team. Meet with the Senate President and the House Speaker to talk about it. Meet with the Commissioner of the Great Salt Lake every month, and what I've been told is that the negotiations are ongoing. It's difficult right now, for sure, Ben. It's kind of, you've got the upper basin states, the lower basin states, California and Arizona. There seems to be some divide between California and Arizona in where they are, and everybody's just trying to work through this and figure it out. We're working closely with the federal government as well. I think there's opportunities for us to get there, for sure. We're going to need investments in technology, and I think we should be willing to help with that. Desalination should be important for our country. Lots of other countries are doing that. Obviously, California sits in a place where desalination could work, but it's very expensive, and California shouldn't have to bear the cost of that alone. And so I think we can continue to work together to figure out new water sources and then how to divide up a declining river between the seven states.
So are you on board with this idea that the Senate president has floated in the past of giving California money for desalination in exchange for Colorado River water shares?
Yeah, I would absolutely be in favor of something like that. And again, the federal government would have to be involved, helping there as well, as it benefits lots of states. But those are ideas that make sense. And as we continue to grow as a nation, we're going to have to be really smart about doing that, and we're going to have to help each other out and be willing to find compromises.
And that's all the time we have for our television broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us for the Governor's Monthly News Conference. And Governor, I have a question from Christine Weller from KPCW that I'm going to get to. Why do you think Sundance decided to leave Utah and Park City, and do you have any plans to bring any other arts festivals to the state?
Yeah, thank you. So I think that we've talked often in this forum and others. It's been written about the reasons for Sundance leaving. We've been told by Sundance leadership, and I trust them, that it was purely a monetary issue for them. They'd been struggling for years, and thought that the Colorado offer was a more generous offer, which is fine. As to doing something in the future, yes, we've had lots of conversations. I'll be having more. It's been amazing, the repercussions of Sundance leaving. It's been the best thing that could happen. The number of people in lots of different industries, in arts and entertainment, who are interested in doing something bigger here and better than Sundance is just off the charts. And so I mean, my phone hasn't stopped ringing. I've got a list of 50 people who are very well-funded and part of the entertainment industry who want to do something. So we not just film, but music and tech, and so there's going to be an incredible opportunity for us to put something together. It's just figuring out what that structure is, when, and getting the ball moving, and so you'll start to see some of those pieces come into place over the next month for sure. Kim, I'm going to go back to you.
How do you see Trump's tariffs on Chinese goods impacting Utahns, and what is your administration doing to combat higher costs for residents?
Yeah, so we're, as I mentioned, I think in a past press conference, we have a team of economists put together who are working on all the tariff-related issues and presenting the facts to us as they happen. We're reaching out to manufacturers and trying to get the very best information that we can, and then helping those companies. So we have World Trade Center Utah, the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, that are working with these companies. By the way, we do this all the time to helping them find new suppliers and better, cheaper ways to make their product. We've had some incentives in the past, and I think we'll be increasing those to move manufacturing here, which is why we led the nation in manufacturing growth last year, over the last 5 years, which is something that we're very proud of. So things are heading in a very positive direction. But specific to China, and I have lots of issues with China. I can tell you that was the one thing when we met with our Canadian counterparts that they absolutely agreed on, that we should be pushing back on China and some of their unfair practices and some of their own tariffs and other issues. That being said, there are still a lot of companies that manufacture out of China, and especially smaller companies in Utah who are going to be hit the hardest. And so now I know there have been some exclusions for for phones and technology that will help a little bit, but there are lots of companies that are just going to be hurt, and there's not much we can do about it other than trying to help them. That's why we led 2 trade delegations to Mexico last year, because if you can't reshore here in the United States, can we get you nearshoring at least closer to home in Mexico? Lots of companies have wanted to leave China. There's been signs for years that China is not a place you want to be doing business right now. Some of them have moved to Vietnam, some of them to Malaysia, other places, some of them are trying to get into India. Mexico, again, has really benefited, and we've benefited moving back here. So I'm concerned about the small businesses that are going to be impacted by this. I'm hopeful that we can find that we can find a detente in this trade war that's happening between the 2 countries, that we can figure out. I like to remind people that in Trump's first administration, he put tariffs on China. When President Biden came in, he tried to undo everything Trump did except that. He left the tariffs on China. He believed in tariffs on China for whatever reason. And so I think we do need to push back, but I hope we can be strategic about it as we figure out what this looks like over the next few weeks.
On that same point, though,
Yeah.
when you were meeting with your on this trade mission to Canada, what was their message to you about the tariffs, the trade wars?
Oh, yeah.
Do you share their
Sure,
concerns?
yeah. No, their message is exactly what you would expect and what you've heard from the premiers there and from the prime minister, and that is that they are probably our most important trading partner for most states. Certainly here, they're our number 2 trading partner, but if you exclude the gold trade with the UK, they're really number 1. And again, that's true of most states. And so a deep concern about the impact that's going to have on them. They felt really disheartened, I guess would be one way to say it. Some use the words kind of betrayed, that as our closest ally and friends that these issues would happen. And yet there was also a recognition by many of them that they needed to make some changes in Canada as well, which I think is helpful. Canada has had very high tariffs on several of their products. And dairy products is an example of that, lumber and others with the U.S. But also, and this is one thing I didn't realize, lots of trade barriers between provinces in Canada. That was I didn't realize that because we don't have that. We don't have tariffs on goods from California, and yet they do. And so an opportunity to reduce trade barriers there, and a recognition that they needed to invest more in their security and defense as well. So it was interesting to hear this recognition that they did need to make some changes and were willing to do that. But yeah, obviously they were very hurt. We're their overwhelmingly large trading partner, and they're going to try to diversify more of their trade with other places. But we want to continue that partnership because we think it's really important.
You put together a recession plan. This uncertainty, this tariffs, the collapsing Dow.
For sure. I mean, we're always planning for the worst. That's part of what we do every year, and we're one of the few states that does that. That's why we have such a high bond rating, a AAA bond rating, one of the few states that does. It's why we continue to rank high in so many metrics, because we truly do plan for the worst, and we're very conservative in our metrics. But look, I look at the data just like everyone else, and the possibility of a recession has gone up significantly. Certainly, the trade wars have played a role in that. There are other things, though, beyond that. And again, whether you think trade wars are good or bad or will lead to something better, everybody agrees that it's going to cause pain in the short term, and we have to be ready for that. And so we'll be very cautious in our spending when the new budget kicks in on July 1st. We'll ask people to be very cautious. We'll look at what the key indicators are heading into July, and we'll adjust accordingly. That's what we do best.
With agency cuts or, you know, this plan that you're implementing? How do you ensure that, you know, often when we see the budget cuts at the legislative level, it's social services that take a big hit. How do you ensure that equity?
Yeah, so what we try to do and what I would do, again, the legislature ultimately controls the purse. I want to be very clear about that. But absent a legislative session, even if I have the budget, that doesn't mean the money's going to come in to spend. And so I could, like other states, just spend it and then make them deal with it in a year. But we don't like to do that. And so we would be equitable in those types of cuts and engage. We did this during during the Great Recession. I didn't become lieutenant governor until 2013, but we were still kind of on the end of the Great Recession. But that's what we did. We took some across the board cuts, but then we let the experts who run those departments figure out how to implement those, because in recessionary times, there are some places where you would want to increase the budget and others where you would want to decrease it more. And so that doesn't mean, so say we take a 3% cut, that doesn't mean you cut 3% from every program, but every department would have to find those 3% cuts in their own ways that make sense and continue to serve the people of the state.
Over this last weekend, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro and his family were attacked by an arsonist. And I'm wondering if your team has felt the need to increase security for you and your family at the governor's mansion. And I also want to know what your reaction is to this and what Utahns can do to decrease the temperature as we see what has become a series of assassination attempts in our country.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Brigham. This is a tough one. Josh and Lori are very good friends of ours. Abby, the First Lady of Utah, and the First Lady of Pennsylvania just spent several days together with Special Olympics in Italy at the Special Olympics Games with Second Lady Vance. The three of them were there together. They were the three representatives from the United States. I've known Josh for years. He was Attorney General before he was governor, and he's a Democrat. We have lots of different views. He's one of the best people I know, and our families are similar. They have 4 kids. They're a little bit younger than our 4 kids. I think they still have 2 left at home. We have 1 left at home. And so this one hit really hard when you get a knock on the door at 2 in the morning, and it's every governor's worst fear. And look, we're in the arena. It is what it is. We kind of take this stuff, but for your spouse and especially for your kids, it's incredibly damaging. And I can tell you that yeah, as soon as we heard about it, my family was deeply concerned. Those fears are always there. You just kind of try to tamp them down a little bit. And yes, our security teams reached out immediately, reached out to their counterparts. There's a nationwide network of security for governors. They talk about these things. They get the up-to-the-minute details about what happened, how it happened, what can be done to prevent it. And so the experts are routinely reevaluating our safety protocols in this kind of atmosphere. I will say 2 years ago, when I first became chair of the National Governors Association, our very first meeting in New Hampshire, we had some experts there. And the experts said, judging by what we're seeing across the country, we expect assassination attempts to increase significantly over the next few years. And sure enough, now we've seen several after going a while without having any. We've had security breaches at the governor's residence here in Salt Lake City. We've had security breaches at the Capitol. We had a security breach at the Capitol the first week of the session. So yeah, these things are happening, and it really is incumbent on all of us. Look, I know politics is serious business. I know it impacts people's lives. I'm not saying you should take it less seriously, but I am saying that pleading, I guess, more than anything else, to just think twice about what you post on social media. Just because it feels good doesn't mean we should do it. Try to state your cause without tearing other people down, and certainly without any intimidation or threats of violence. It just takes one person in a state of 3.5 million to do something crazy and end a life or destroy a family. So I'm grateful that Governor Shapiro and his family are safe. I was texting with him the morning before that night it happened about another issue, and was able to communicate with him on Sunday after it happened, and just want them to know how grateful we are that they're safe.
If I could ask a two-part question.
Sure.
Yesterday, the union groups turned in 320,000 signatures plus. Part one, is there a message to be sent there? Does this tell you something about the public's sentiment about that bill in particular? And part two, you mentioned there's a special session in May. Is there any discussion of potentially reassessing that bill?
Yeah. So right now, I'll answer the second part of the question first, if that's okay. Right now, I've not had any discussions about readdressing that issue or that bill. To the first part,
Potentially doing that? I mean, that's what happened with the tax.
Yeah, sure.
referendum.
If the legislature was interested, I mean, I said from the beginning I didn't like the bill. It wasn't something I was interested in, not something I would have run. In fact, I told people exactly this. I told legislators this. I said, look, there's a very real possibility that you have. And you have an association right now. You have a union that really isn't doing anything on Capitol Hill. They haven't for several years, since 2000, with the UEA. And you know, this could really change things. This could actually strengthen the unions. I want to congratulate them for their signatures, not just the UEA, but others as well. It takes a lot of work, I know, as someone who's worked hard to gather signatures over the years, and to get 300,000 signatures is very impressive. People ask if I was surprised, and I said I'm actually not surprised. It's called organized labor for a reason. They're actually organized. This is one of the few areas where you can actually do something like that, because the organizations are already in place. And so I fully expected that we would have a referendum on this, and I think that's healthy. I really do. I think it's good for our democracy, for our republic, and that's why the referendum process. Now, I don't like initiatives, but I do like referendums, because it is a check on the legislative power. It's a powerful check. It can only be used rarely when there's significant backlash, which is how it should work. And in this case, it's working. I don't know what that means, though. I don't know if you can extrapolate the number of signatures to broad public support over the course of a year and a half, which is when the vote will take place, a year from November. It's very possible that it will translate to that, but I think what it means is that their members are very well organized. And again, if it was just teachers, I think they could have gotten the signatures. It would have been close. But when you add other organized labor unions, the odds of them getting their signatures, I thought, went up tremendously. But 300,000 is a big number and a very impressive number.
Sorry, why didn't you veto the bill then, if you didn't like it?
Yeah, so I sign lots of bills I don't like for lots of different reasons, and I said that in this one. Look, I tried to get a compromise done. They were unable or unwilling, depending on who you believe and who you listen to get that done. And so those are those are the consequences. I will say it's always hard to veto a bill early in the session. That's always a difficult proposition as well. But I also want to be clear. Like, I believe in parts of this bill. There's no question about it. And we don't. There's a lot of misinformation about what this bill does and doesn't do, and some of that has been intentional as well. There is very little collective bargaining that happens in our state anyway. I've had teachers say, "How now we can't bargain?" I said, "That's not true at all. Your district has never had collective bargaining. This doesn't impact you in any way." Same with public safety, for example. I think there's only one community that still does collective bargaining on the public safety side. So it doesn't have as big of an impact as people I think it does in the final version of the bill. But again, that's how this works.
You teased something to replace potentially Sundance a few moments ago. You said something is coming in the next month or two. Can you elaborate on what that something is? It is a film festival? Is it tech and music, as you mentioned? What exactly?
No, I don't know what it is yet. So I'm not teasing it in that way. What I'm saying is that there's a lot of people that want to do something. We just don't know what that something is yet. And so that's what's going to be happening over the course of the next month or two, bringing those people together and putting those ideas on paper, seeing what it looks like, and then potentially moving forward.
Do you think that will be in place by 2027?
I
when
really
Sundance
don't
is out?
know. I really don't know. I mean, I would hope so. I think we could absolutely do that. I think we could have it in place by 2026 potentially, but it would take a lot of work. These things don't come together easily, but it is one of the things we're really good at here in Utah is bringing people together, putting a plan in place, and executing. And so it surely could be done by next year, and I don't see any reason why we couldn't have something in place by 2027.
Do you think it will be as big?
I think it will be bigger.
Bigger than Sundance?
Yeah, I think it will be bigger. I think whatever we do, it will be bigger.
Going
For
back
sure.
to tariffs for a second, another question from Christine Weller from KPCW. Has there been larger discussions on how tariffs could impact like the 2034 Olympics or affordable housing infrastructure, those things that we'd be looking forward to in the future?
No, not at all. I don't think there will be any impact on the 2034 Olympics. When it comes to housing, certainly there are concerns there, and I think that's important to understand that again, even on paper. And I'm supportive. I think there are needs for tariffs in certain areas. I think we do need to reevaluate and should be reevaluating what's happening in manufacturing in certain critical areas as well. And yet the global supply chain is just that. It's very hard to disconnect so many of those pieces. We've had. We've had different manufacturers who thought that they were immune from these tariffs because they build everything here in the United States, who suddenly found out that a component from someone else that they bought that is from the United States comes from somewhere else, and now they're seeing a significant increase there. When it comes to building a home, there are lots of different parts of building a home that come from other places, and those raw materials may come from different countries, and so I'm always concerned about the price of housing and what that means for our state and for our country. It's something that everybody's facing. I'm most interested, again, and I'm very supportive of getting pieces of this right. And so I'm grateful that we have an administration that's willing to look at this. I'm hopeful for more certainty, and that's where I think businesses can be resilient. Capital is a coward for sure, but once you know the rules, business and entrepreneurs will figure out a way to work around whatever those parameters are. It's harder when you don't know what the rules are going forward. Excuse me, to decide whether you're going to invest. And so more than anything, we just need to get this nailed down as quickly as possible.
Governor, what's your position on Mike Lee's SAVE Act that requires proof of citizenship to vote?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's very important. Look, the Utah Constitution talks about voting and the parameters of voting, and our Utah Constitution very clearly states that only American citizens, U.S. citizens, can vote in our elections, and you have to show proof of residency when that happens. And so as an administration, as a governor, I'm very supportive of Senator Lee and the concepts behind the SAVE Act. I think it's critical. No one should want those who are here illegally voting in our elections. I think the question is, how do you do that in a way that makes it so people who should be able to vote legally can vote? And so some of those details still need to be worked out and will be worked out as it moves through Congress. And I think we'll get in a great place where we can do both of those things.
One of the criticisms is that it disenfranchises, for example, even women whose birth certificates don't match their married name, right? Do you think the bill does that?
I don't think it does that. And I think those allegations have been pretty well debunked, that it does not do that.
Okay, we're going to wrap right there. Thank you, Governor.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for your time. It's rainy out there. I think we're going to get some snow tomorrow, so be careful out there. But it's a beautiful time for spring in Utah. We're lucky to live in this state. Again, we were just named for the 18th year in a row the best economic outlook, and it's because we have the best people here. So thank you for being here, and good luck this week. Thanks, everyone.